So I feel like no one really talks about how being an A student growing up and that A student mentality can really jack you up later in life. And so this is the story of how I started to realize and become aware of how that was affecting my go get it attitude as an adult and also affecting certain aspects of my marriage and my relationship. And I think awareness is power, right? So let's talk about it. How many of us here were that A student? Like, and this is no shade, this is no pedestal. I just want to know how many people are listening to this that maybe can relate and drop into what it is that I'm saying. And even if you weren't, I still think all of this is relevant. But just let me know, like, were you like gotta get them A's type of person? Let me know in the comments. Just put an A. You and I will know what it means. Passers by be like, what's all that? But we know. So for me, I prided myself on being an A student. I got good grades. I was usually in the top 5 of my class. I was picked for things. I sat in the front of the class. I raised my hand when I knew the answers, but I didn't want to be obnoxious. So like other people could answer too. Like I wasn't like every question I have to answer. You know what I mean? Let's spread the love. But I absolutely was like, gotta get these good grades, gotta get an A, gotta be impressive. And what happens when you get it? Let's talk about that. What happens when you get these grades, when you get that A? People like, oh snap, like let's just scenario. Your teacher, they know you got an A on that paper. They put the paper, they're handing out the paper in front of when you think about it, that is a wild thing. Because now kids get their grades online, okay, and this is a asterisk, but stay with me. They get their grades online and it's a very intimate and I feel like private experience because you see your grade by yourself. So but back in the day they're just handing it out to you and it was like a red letter on the front of whatever it is and somebody could look over, or maybe they were even like, we're going to hand it to you face down, but then obviously you're going to turn it around and put it face up, and then when you face up, somebody's going to be looking at your grade. So it wasn't a very private, you know, intimate experience. But they're handing you your grade. You get that A, you smile to yourself. Teacher's like, good job, Imani. Good job, Jessica. Great job, James. Like whatever it is. And then the people are getting like the C's, the D's, or the F's. I don't know what is getting said to them, but it's not like, great job. Good job, Michael. So you go home, you show your parents your A, and they're like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Great, you got an A. Good job. Da, da, da. You get the accolades. I was the student who got merit awards for my grades. I was, inducted into uh like what do you call it? I was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa as a junior. You have to be nominated for that. So it's not even just grades, it's also like how you're showing up as a student, your fire, all of these things. And I'm sure that there were aspects of it that were performative, but I wasn't chasing the grade. I was chasing all of the rigmarole that came with the grade. Because what I realized later in my life, I would probably my mid to late 30s when I realized this. What I realized later in my life was that I had attached a lot of my identity to being an A student because that is when I got praise and accolades and I felt like people were proud of me. There were fewer things outside of academics where I felt that. This doesn't mean that, I mean, I was involved in choirs and chorus and singing, and my parents loved me and said they were proud of me, and I can remember them as I got older saying like, you're such a beautiful woman, I'm so proud of the woman you've become, etc. But there was something that stuck with me because you're in school so much and grades and all of that is such a big part of your life. Something stuck with me when it came to the grade piece. And my identity as an A student was something that I prided myself in. And you had to work for that. And it had to be something that was seen and that people knew about, and that you had to show up in a certain way. And that's where you got the praise. And that's where you got the accolades. and something less than A work, not so much. Not so much. I was like, dang, I'm a perfectionist. As I got grown and I started to realize and deal with this, I'm like, this is me. I'm a perfectionist. And what does that really mean when we talk about being a perfectionist? I was looking at where that might have come from for me, from like this identity of being a student. But what did that mean for the things that I wanted to do in life? It meant that I didn't want to put things out there that I didn't think that I would be really, really good at. I didn't want to um I didn't want to put something out if it didn't look super good, professional, perfect, polished, what have you. And that meant some things got put on the shelf and never got put out there. That meant that some things were going to be pushed back and I could have put it out sooner. That meant that I wasn't leaping because I didn't want to fail at something. But that's how you learn. That's how you learn your lessons. And I wanted to piece together ways that I couldn't fail. I wanted to know enough about it and ask enough questions and get enough clarity that when I go in there, it's going to be the best it could possibly be. And sometimes that was stifling. I I also have to give myself credit looking back on all the things that I still accomplished. I don't think that everything is black and white, right? I live in the gray. I've said this on the channel before. And so I also believe that we can't have tunnel vision on the things that we need to improve on and that are not necessarily serving or working with us. We still have to look at the larger picture of what we have done and not just like this is what we haven't done or this is what we didn't do well. And I'm like, no, I got things done. I wrote poetry. I didn't keep it to myself. I did spoken word. I went to poetry readings. I put myself out there numerous times in different ways. I put myself out there in high school and in college. There's something about me that I have that in me as well. And yet, especially in starting my business, later in life, almost a decade ago now, and being in my coaching business, I was like putting out certain workshops and do I was doing the most. And sometimes my coaches, the ones who were coaching me, would be like, just do it. Just you have to just put it out there. And then the kind of anxiety that would come up in me, I'm like, what if this and what if that, and I still need to tweak this, and I didn't think about this, and I have 10 more steps I need to do before I get it just right so that I can put. And it's like you need to just do it, which is ironic because yesterday I was like, take the shot, right? And I think this is a partner to yesterday's video, but still different in the sense that like this is where it was coming from for me, and I realized the perfectionism that was coming from that was going to stifle, you know, I was going to be stagnant where I needed to be in momentum. There was going to be stagnation instead of momentum. And I needed the momentum and I craved the momentum and I wanted the momentum. And yet, and still, I was like, well, wait, pause, let me figure this out. And I feel like there's a thin line between, being thinking things through and being quote unquote smart about it and all of that versus I'm stuck in a little bit of perfectionist paralysis and I'm not going to do it. What I did know was I had the foresight to know about myself because I'm a good student. So this is what made it good. And then I'm like, oh, let me make sure I get coaching on this. Let me make sure that somebody who knows more than me can help me figure out the ways so that I can do it correctly and do it right and not jack it up on my own. Because if I do this on my own, then I'm probably going to struggle and it's going to be like a whole thing. Isn't that what their marketing says? Like you can go it alone, but you're probably going to make all the mistakes I already made. And then I can tell you how to not make those mistakes. I was like, yes, that seems like the better choice. And so I hired a coach for many years in my business. I had coaching in varying ways and in varying aspects of my business, mindset included, mindset paramount, mindset priority. And I was like, okay, well, this is what I got to do to make sure that I do this right and to make sure that I get the results that I want to get. And having that foresight is partly because I knew how to be a student, right? Okay, great. And also, I'm sure that that perfectionist part is frustrating for a coach because like you have good students, you have these A students who have this A student mentality, and that means that, you know, there's going to be an issue. Because the thing about being an A student is that like maybe you have an off day and you get a B, and you don't get the accolades for the B, you get questions. And you're like, oh, so what? I mean, you usually get A's. So what happened here? And maybe that's a valid question. Like, I was tired. I didn't study. I was burned out. I don't know what the answer is, but you know you're not going to get that praise because you were less than perfect, even a little bit less. You were slipping just a little bit, and it had a ripple effect. And so and so yeah, I'm sure it's frustrating for coaches to be like, look, I need you to stop being perfectionist. I need you to just do it, put it out there, because you can't make any money if you don't have the offerings to put out there. And I did it because I'm a good student. I did it. Had I gone it alone, I probably wouldn't have, but that's part of the problem, right? I needed to trust myself to go it alone. I needed to trust myself to not just be in student mode, because the truth was I had also been a teacher. So I've been in teacher mode. So I knew some things. And it's okay to hire someone because, hire someone to help you with the things that are not your lane, or you don't want to do, or you don't know as much about. But careful not to make that a crutch. At some point, I had to trust myself in it too. At some point, I even had to say, I got to push back a little bit, And I think being from the Bronx and being in New York helped me with that. I think it helped me. I think the environment that I was in helped me with that. I think the parents that I had helped me with that. And so I have some harmony in the A student mentality and the, push back a little bit, just do it kind of mentality. So that was helpful. But I had to learn to trust in myself, that done is better than perfect, that perfect doesn't actually even exist. It's what you're striving for. There's probably always something you can do to change it, to feel like you can make it better, something you can tweak. And you know what? You can do that later. You can put it out, and then you can revise it later and come out with a new and improved edition. But at least you put it out there. And I remember my coach August, she would say to me that there's people that want your help, they need your messaging, and you are not prepared to do that for them because you're stuck in how it looks, and they're not really thinking about how it looks fully. And she would like show her first website, like, look at this, and I was still getting clients, right? Because I was showing up as myself. I was doing this thing, and all of the background aesthetics, maybe they weren't perfect. I learned and I grew, but I put it out there. I remember a friend of mine had written a book, and it was so funny because she had slapped that book together and she put it out for sale because she was a hustler. Okay, she knew how to make money from anything. Child, she would make a business out of anything. When you saw, she is the quintessential serial entrepreneur. And I remember I was an English major. I'm going through it. I was like, in my head, I was like, there's typos. There's like things that there's spaces maybe where there shouldn't be spaces. And then I stopped myself in my own head. This is not anything I said to her because I really was happy for her. But if we have to be honest, what goes through our head, and it had nothing to do with her. This was my stuff. This was my stuff. And I was like, Imani, she got a book out and she's selling it and she's making money off what is in here that she put down in this book, and people are buying it. And apparently, they're going to buy it and then get the information. Who cares about the typo? I bought it, in support of her. And also I was like, girl, what hustles, what you do? This is where you put your secrets. Let me find out. So it's that mindset of just like, do it, just do the thing. Because the people that are just doing the thing and putting it out there and learning from that, the level of growth that I can have when I do that, and I have had when I do that, and I continue to have. I call myself a recovering perfectionist because I think sometimes you can slip back into your ways, but absolutely putting it out there, putting the stuff out, putting myself out there, showing up imperfectly, learning in the process, and going from there. In my relationship, right? I meant to get to this part sooner, but we're having a conversation, and sometimes that's where conversations go. But relationship stuff, You don't even have those moments where you're like, you do things a certain way. You fold the laundry a certain way, you put it in the drawers a certain way. You either do like the retail, I used to work in retail fold method, or you're rolling up for space. You have a certain way you put the dishes in the dishwasher. There's a certain time for snack for your toddler that you like. You've got a system. And then you have to leave, okay, for something. And now your spouse is taking over the systems, but they have their own system and they're going to do it their way. And you're like, no, this is how you're supposed to do it. This is how, load the dishwasher like this. When you fold it, you got to put it in this drawer. And it's difficult to let go of the fact that you did I used to work in retail fold method, and you put all the t-shirts color coded on the left and then the pants on the right, because you put your shirt on first and then your pants, and that's how you believe it should be. And they're doing the roll method, and you're like, you're rolling it, but now I gotta move this roll over to see what this is. And at least if you're gonna roll it, let the logos and the be on the outside of the shirt, like the whole shebang. And that is your perfectionist stuff showing up. So then you can project onto your spouse, your partner, that they're not doing something correctly just because they have a different method of doing it, because that it doesn't allow you to let go and let them do their thing their way, because it's not harming anybody, and everybody's not going to do it like you, and your way isn't the right way. When you have a perfectionist mindset, you be like, this is the way that you're supposed to do it, though. This is because that's the way that makes sense. And you have to, what we really have to do is kind of drop down and ask ourselves, is this going to harm anything? Does this really matter? Does this make a whole lot of sense to go into? Or is it just my own stuff coming up? And a lot of times, probably 8 out of 10, I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10, it's our own stuff coming up. It's our own, this is how I do it, and thus this is how you should do it. Those kind of projections aren't healthy for our relationship when we find ourselves in them without realizing it's more about us. The I think the bigger picture is for us to realize it's more about us than it is about them, and then we can handle us. And we don't have to put it out on them and have it become an argument, have it become a thing, have it become an issue. All of that is important, for us. And just as an individual, we can become stagnant when there should be momentum. There can be big decisions and things that need to be made in the relationship. There will. Decision making is a big part of partnership and relationship and marriage. So are you gonna buy this house? What neighbor are you gonna buy this house in? Are you gonna switch from public school to private school? What's the financial implications of that? What is that even, what would that require of you in terms of time and energy? Are you going to, you know, I don't know, like start that nonprofit? Or are you somebody going to quit their job and go back to school? Like decisions that need to be made in the relationship. And you may take a little bit longer to commit to a decision, because nothing seems quite right. Nothing seems like the perfect decision, but a lot of times you pick a horse and you ride it and you see where it takes you. I remember Bozoma St. John. I'm paraphrasing, but she did an interview and she was like, I wasn't worried about making the right decision. Because whatever decision I made, it was going to be the right decision. I was going to make that decision, and then I was going to do the things around that decision. And if I had to pivot, then you pivot. And she was like, it's that simple. Right. And sometimes it doesn't feel that simple, but essentially it is. You pick a horse and you ride it. And when you're like, it has to be just right, it can be difficult to pick a horse and ride it. It can be difficult to deal with change. It can be difficult to pivot. And there's power in pivoting in our lives and definitely in our relationships. And so, yeah, all of this, if we have like the rewind the tape sound effect that goes back to what it felt like to be an A student, what it felt like for that to be the A on my chest, to that be a big part of my identity, and then what it felt like to realize in my mid to late 30s how that was actually the awareness of how that was actually showing up in different aspects of my life. And that awareness gave me a lot of power, and it empowered me to make shifts and changes that have been game changers for myself and continue to be game changers, right? Recovering perfectionist. So sometimes I have to continue to come back to a state of awareness of that, of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's that perfectionist thing showing up. That's that A student persona. And yeah, and I wanted to get it twisted. There's nothing wrong with, like, putting in your all and thinking things through, like I said before, but live in the gray. And this is, I there's a big part of me that lives in the gray. And yet it's a lot of layers here to this onion. And yet still having that mentality and having to check that so that I can let go, so that I can pivot, so that I can have momentum instead of stagnation. All of these things that we want and yearn for in our relationship with ourselves and in our relationship with our partners. And so, yeah, I hope that was something, whoever was supposed to receive that today, whoever that resonates with today, let me know down in the comments. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm Imani Aisha, and I'm here showing up to remind you to stay connected to yourself, to your partner, and to creating a life that feels good to you. And if that's your vibe, please subscribe. And I'd love to have you on this journey with me, have these conversations about self, relationship, and change in life and all the things, including one of the biggest changes that I've had in my life in the last few months, which is my husband and my kids, our family adjusting to living abroad. So come with me on the journey, join in the conversation, and I'm gonna see you tomorrow.